When Nazi Germany collapsed in 1945, the world thought the nightmare was finally over. But as Allied forces pushed deeper into the ruins of the Reich, they began uncovering things that were almost more terrifying than the war itself. Hidden laboratories, forgotten bunkers, experimental weapons. Each discovery revealed just how far the Nazis had been willing to go in their pursuit of power. And some of what they left behind still sparks fear and mystery today. Hitler called them the Wunderwaffe, wonder weapons. They were designed to change the course of the war, to deliver a final devastating blow even as Germany was on the edge of defeat. The most infamous was the W2 rocket, the world's first ballistic missile. It traveled faster than the speed of sound and struck its targets with no warning. Civilians in London and Antwerp described the W2 not as a weapon, but as death falling from the sky. But the plans didn't stop there. Among the files Allied intelligence uncovered were designs for the America bomber, a long-range aircraft meant to fly across the Atlantic and strike New York City. The fact that Hitler dreamed of bombing Manhattan wasn't just military ambition, it was a glimpse into his obsession with psychological warfare, of showing the world that nowhere was safe from his reach. The coastal research base at Peenemünde was where these weapons were born. When Allied forces captured it, they found the twisted remnants of a project that looked ripped from science fiction. Rocket parts, destroyed test stands, experimental aircraft. But the most haunting discovery wasn't the technology, it was the evidence of human suffering. Thousands of forced laborers, many of them concentration camp prisoners, had been sent to build these rockets under brutal conditions. In the underground factory at Mittelwerk, men and women were worked to death in tunnels carved in mountainsides. For every W2 rocket launched, lives had already been lost in its making. The so-called miracle weapon was built on human misery. Then there was the enigma that still baffles historians: Die Glocke, the bell. Described by captured SS officers after the war, it was said to be a bell-shaped device filled with strange metallic fluids, surrounded by powerful electromagnetic fields. Some claimed it could alter gravity, others said it was an attempt to unlock new forms of propulsion, or even time manipulation. No physical trace of the bell was ever recovered. Was it a real weapon, a desperate Nazi fantasy, or something still hidden in the mountains of Europe? Whatever the truth, the idea of the Nazis experimenting with forces beyond known science has made the bell one of the most chilling mysteries of the war. Across Germany, the Allies discovered massive underground complexes that seemed more like hidden cities than bunkers. In the Harz Mountains and at Mittelwerk, networks of tunnels stretched for miles. These were intended to be bomb-proof factories, safe havens for Nazi leaders, even entire shadow communities where the war could continue underground. To the soldiers who walked through these tunnels, the silence was haunting. Here was proof of just how far the Reich was willing to go to survive. If they had finished these projects, the war might have dragged on for years. If the rockets and secret bunkers were terrifying, what came next was even darker. Because buried inside Nazi Germany's laboratories and camps were experiments that revealed just how far their obsession with control and domination went. At Dachau and other concentration camps, Allied investigators uncovered records of experiments that seemed more like torture than science. Prisoners were frozen alive to study hypothermia. Others were forced into pressure chambers that simulated high-altitude flight, many dying in agony as their lungs collapsed. In another program, prisoners were deliberately infected with malaria, typhus, and tuberculosis so doctors could test experimental cures. The Nazis claimed this was for medical advancements, but it was really about creating weapons and strengthening their own soldiers. For the survivors, if you could call them that, the scars were lifelong. For the world, these documents revealed the full scale of medical horror hidden behind barbed wire. But not all Nazi projects were rooted in conventional science. Some veered into the bizarre and unsettling. The SS, led by Heinrich Himmler, funded expeditions to Tibet, the Arctic, and even South America in search of ancient relics and mythical knowledge. They believed these could give Germany supernatural power. Artifacts were seized from across Europe. books on witchcraft, medieval grimoires, even the Holy Lance, which legend said pierced the side of Christ. Allied forces later found collections of occult material hidden in castles and monasteries, proof that the Nazi elite wasn't just fighting a military war, but also chasing shadows of mythical power. The terrifying question: what if they had succeeded in unlocking something far darker than anyone imagined? As the Reich crumbled, whispers began of hidden treasure. Gold, art, and priceless jewels looted from occupied countries seemed to vanish overnight. In 1945, Allied soldiers uncovered caches of stolen wealth buried in salt mines and caves, paintings by masters like Rembrandt and Vermeer stacked like firewood alongside chests of gold bars. But not everything was recovered. To this day, stories persist of Nazi gold trains loaded with treasure that vanished into the tunnels of Poland, never to be seen again. Adventurers and historians have spent decades searching for these lost fortunes, and occasionally a new lead reignites the chase. Whether fact or myth, the idea of Nazi treasure still buried beneath Europe is enough to make anyone shiver. Among the strangest discoveries were the blueprints, designs for aircraft that looked like flying saucers, submarines capable of crossing the globe without surfacing, radiation weapons and chemical bombs that, if perfected, could have changed history forever. Some of these concepts were later studied by both the US and the Soviet Union during the Cold War, fueling decades of suspicion. Did Allied superpower advancement come directly from Nazi labs? The documents suggest that in more ways than one, the Reich's ghost lived on after 1945. When Allied soldiers finally tore into the heart of the Reich in 1945, what they uncovered was not just rubble and ruins, but a nightmare that seemed to echo long after the war had ended. In hidden bunkers beneath Berlin and deep in the Harz Mountains, investigators stumbled upon chilling evidence of what the Nazis had left behind. Some tunnels were stacked with corpses, hastily buried as the Reich collapsed. Others contained documents, blueprints, orders, medical records that laid bare the crimes the regime tried desperately to erase. One of the most disturbing finds was in Nordhausen, where Allied forces entered underground factories producing V2 rockets. The rockets themselves were terrifying enough, but the true horror was the thousands of starved, skeletal prisoners who had been worked to death building them. Rows of bodies were found piled in corners. It wasn't just about weapons, it was about the human cost buried beneath concrete. As they sifted through abandoned offices, the Allies also discovered SS archives detailing plans that never saw the light of day. These included proposals for mass sterilization using radiation, ideas for chemical warfare that would have poisoned entire cities, and files on millions of individuals marked for extermination. The sheer scale was so overwhelming that even hardened soldiers reportedly wept when they read the pages. Many of these documents later formed the basis of the Nuremberg trials, providing undeniable proof of crimes against humanity. But others vanished into secrecy, seized by Soviet and American intelligence. To this day, some files remain classified, sparking speculation about what horrors are still locked away. Not every Nazi project was found. Rumors spread of hidden facilities in the Alps, seized chambers in Poland, and lost laboratories deep in Eastern Europe. In the years after the war, strange reports surfaced, villagers claiming to have seen glowing lights in abandoned mines, or locals whispering about trains that vanished underground. Even decades later, expeditions continued to dig for lost Nazi relics, from advanced technology to rumored biological experiments. The question is always the same. What else did the Nazis hide before their world collapsed? And if some of it is never uncovered, would humanity even be prepared to face it? The most terrifying part of all these discoveries wasn't just the weapons, the bunkers, or the experiments. It was the realization that a regime had mobilized an entire nation not only for war, but for nightmares that blended science, cruelty, and myth. The Allies may have defeated Nazi Germany on the battlefield, but what they uncovered in the aftermath served as a warning. Even in defeat, the Reich left behind shadows long enough to haunt generations. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.